Hello there and welcome to episode 7 of the Grapplehook Podcast. My name's Matt and I'm joined by Dan. How's it going?
Howdy. Yeah, all right, yourself?
Yeah, steady away, steady away. So this is the Grapplehook Podcast. It's a gaming podcast where me and Dan get together each week and talk about gaming news, what we've been playing, and answer any questions or queries that you may have as well. You can get in touch with the show by messaging me or Dan on Twitter. You can reach out to me on Twitter at Matroidvania or Dan at TatchND. That's TATCHND. And we record every Wednesday and we release for free on a Friday morning. So Dan, what have you been playing since we last spoke?
Not right much.
No?
I've played a little bit of God of War. Probably played about another maybe I don't know, but maybe another hour and a half of it in the last week. But yeah, no, sort of not much in the way of gaming this week.
No?
No, I've been working myself through or working my way through Cobra Kai on Netflix.
Oh, that's meant to be cracking, that.
It's honestly my favorite TV show right now.
Nice.
I absolutely love it. It's so well made. The cast is great. I think it's really good how it's continued the story of the Karate Kid, but it's kind of flipped the script, and what used to be kind of the bad people are now sort of good but still kind of bad, and the good people are kind of bad but still kind of good. Like it's good. I guess it neutralizes the characters' sort of morality in the first in the first film, and now that they've kind of grown up, their rivalry's still there, but it's sort of less complicated, but also more complicated because obviously they've grown up and there's other things happening. And no, I like it. I think it doesn't do the first film a disservice in any way. It's just a really nice continuation of that storyline, that world. I can't recall watching because they did more than one Karate Kid, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I can't recall watching anything other than the first one, and then the one with Jaden Smith, all those years later.
With Jackie Chan.
Jackie Chan as the Miyagi. But yeah, no, it's good. I really recommend it. I obviously wouldn't want to say too much, to avoid spoilers, but it's one of those shows where it's like each episode's a half hour. You feel like you get a lot of story within that time. It doesn't sort of outstay its welcome. I think it's like 10 episodes or something.
Nice.
Per season. I think there's 2 seasons, and I think there's a third on the way. I'm not sure though. I've just started the second season.
Yeah, I was going to say, wasn't it a YouTube Premium exclusive at one point? So but it's now on Netflix, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know the sort of the history of it, of sort of how it went from production to YouTube to Netflix, but yeah, I think that's my understanding, is it started as like a YouTube thing, and then at some point, I think probably after season 1, before season 2, Netflix have acquired it, and then obviously they've put some money into it, and I've not watched enough of season 2 to kind of comment on how much of a difference there is in terms of the production quality, but it's just a really good show, and the main sort of, well, the 2 main characters are the 2 main characters from the Karate Kid, Daniel LaRusso, and then Johnny, I think, is the sort of rival blonde kid.
Right.
But it's kind of clever because he's kind of like the bully. He's like the bad guy in the film, and now in the show he's kind of not the bad guy or not the bully, depending on sort of what perspective you take, and it kind of shows you his story from a different, or shows you what happened to him in the first Karate Kid, but from a different perspective, and then it kind of makes Daniel LaRusso look like the bad guy. So it's just that's what I mean when that's what I mean when I say it's less complicated, but also more complicated, because it forces you to kind of see things that you're already used to, but in a different way. And I think that's why it works so well. So So yeah, so not really played any games, but kind of been working my way through Cobra Kai, and really enjoying that.
Nice.
So
That's good. So you highly recommend that one.
oh yeah. I mean, I need to see the second season, just to make sure it doesn't go off the rail. But I've certainly not sort of seen anything that would lead me to believe it gets worse. If anything, it's just getting better. So I'd definitely recommend that.
Oh, nice. That's good. So no games, but a good series there. So, I'm similar. I've played some games this week, but I've played less than what I usually would because I'm finally finishing off. I finished off Dark on Netflix as well, which is
okay. I'm not seeing that.
my absolute favorite Netflix series. Well, probably one of the best things I've seen in years. Which is three seasons long, so it's quite short, and it's a bit different because it's a German series, so you can either watch it dubbed or you can watch it subbed. So, just on that aspect alone, it has less appeal to the general watching public because I can't imagine everyone wants to watch subtitles, whereas me watching anime since I was a wee lad, I'm quite content with watching a film with subtitles in it and things like that. So, but that's fantastic. I'm finally finished that off, and perfect end to a perfect series. It's kind of a bit weird sci-fi, almost like a darker Stranger Things.
Right.
So doesn't have the comedy aspects of Stranger Things and the kind of the endearingness of the characters. It is just very dark, grim, and very, very engaging to watch. Bit complicated at times, but that was quite good. But I finally wanted to finish that off and box it off because it's been sat on my watch list for a while. But that has eaten into my gaming time. So,
oh, interesting. I haven't seen that, and I think you bring up like the subbed versus dubbed thing. I mean that annoys me to no end when people watch things dubbed. It's so sort of you're watching art in the way that it wasn't intended.
Yeah.
Like when we talk about you mentioned anime, and I'm not an anime connoisseur like you, but I've watched all of the Naruto, which is like a million episodes, and obviously Shippuden as well, and I could not imagine watching that in anything but Japanese. Like if you're not willing to watch it in the way that it was made, I just think it's so lazy. It's just nothing bugs me more in films when something's in Swedish and it's like, oh no, I'm going to watch it with English voiceover. Oh, come on.
I think it depends on what you're watching, how good the dub is. I think the trouble with like Naruto, the dub is absolutely horrendous.
Yeah.
And actually, I will say that with Dark, I did watch it with the dub. It's wasn't my preference, but my partner, she doesn't like subtitled series or anything like that. So we're on the sofa, put it on, and she goes, I don't like watching it. I want to watch it. I don't want to read it. But we ended up watching it all dubbed, and the dub was fantastic. So, but I am going to rewatch it subtitled. And if that's such a big issue, the fact that you're watching it dubbed or subbed, the fact that it is, then I class it as my favorite thing on Netflix or favorite series I've watched with a dub, then I'm pretty confident that if you watched it with subtitles, you'd probably enjoy it more. So,
well,
very good.
Yeah, no, I honestly, I would not back down on that point. Like if I sat there with my girlfriend, she's like, "I'm not watching it." Like, don't watch it then. See you. I would not. But I
definitely get your point though with certain things. Like I watched the dub of, or tried to watch the dub of Naruto. Well, not try to. Basically, when I was watching it, someone mentioned at the time, because I watched Naruto way back when it was, early episodes that had just started to come out in Japan.
Yeah.
And a few years later, they then released it in the States, and I thought, oh, okay, let me just check and see what it looks like and see an episode. And the voice acting was just horrendous, and you got to believe and all this nonsense. And we're just like, no, it changes the tone of what we're watching, and it is just poorly acted. However, there are other things that I've watched, like One Piece, which I really enjoyed the manga of One Piece, although it just never ends. But then I started watching the anime, and it was horrendous, even with the Japanese voice. And I couldn't, the voice acting for the main character, Luffy, I just could not get past it. I was just like, no, I can't watch it. It's just not great. So I
Yeah,
think,
but I would argue that that is how it was made, so that is how it should be viewed. I just don't think that a dubbed version will ever be better than the
no,
than the sort of intended version, but with subtitles. Just to bring this back to games, because we're tantalizingly close to becoming a TV and film podcast, and this is a games podcast. So to bring this back for a second, with Final Fantasy 14, I played that. I probably put over 1,000 hours into that game before I realized that you could have Japanese voice with English subtitles, and like I had no idea that was even a feature. Like I just assumed like no, it's just in English. Like, that's the way it is. The voice actors are terrible, and some of the voice acting was okay. Don't get me wrong, but I sort of got through it.
yeah.
When I realized that there was Japanese voices with English subtitles, and I changed that, my enjoyment of that game was 1,000% more instantaneously. Like the first cutscene, I was like, I'm actually tempted to replay everything I've done in this game just to experience it in the way that it was intended.
Yeah.
There is just such a stark difference. I just can't possibly enjoy something.
I just think it depends on what it is and how well stuff is. Like, I would be very surprised if the majority of fans of series like Dragon Ball Z or Akira watched the English version and didn't enjoy it, because for most people that was the only way. Like Dragon Ball Z's got a huge fan base, and
Of course, yeah.
actually, a lot of people actually prefer the voices of the English characters to the Japanese. Again, the way that they make the main characters sound in the Japanese voices don't reflect the characters very well, whereas the and that's kind of a common opinion when it comes to like Goku and how he sounds. And Akira, I mean, Akira is an unbelievable film that most people again would have only seen in the when it was released over to the West. And obviously Studio Ghibli, pretty much all the Studio Ghibli films that come out in the UK or in the West are dubbed. But I think with those ones, particularly Studio Ghibli, they've got there's such a high caliber or in quality that they probably go further than most places will do to make sure that the voice acting sounds good. They've picked the right voices, and not only that, but the people who are doing the voice acting actually understand how the characters are meant to sound in the context of how they would be delivered in the Japanese original. So I think that comes hand in hand. It's like, say, when I watched things like Bleach or Naruto and tried to see what the dub was like, and the characters just sounded completely different and whiny, and you're just like, no, I'm done with this. I'm not doing that. So,
and just
but some places do it better.
You mentioned Akira. That's actually showing in the Leeds cinemas at the moment. The Japanese version of Akira.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I think a lot of different cinemas now, because they're absolutely ballsed due to Corona. They can't, they're not getting new films through. Obviously, Cineworld's just had to. They've just shot in the UK because the new James Bond film's been delayed until next year. And isn't it weird? You've got these like film companies now that actually have films that are completed, they're ready to go, and they're just like, no, we're not releasing them.
Well,
no, we're not releasing them.
You can understand it. It would be no different to a game. I mean, obviously, games are a little bit different because they're enjoyed from the comfort of your home anyway. But you sort of look at the amount of money that they've put into these. I mean, it's a business at the end of the day. You wouldn't open a shop and then close the doors and not let customers in. It's the same principle. Like, they release these movies, they need to make money, and I can empathize, because on one hand you've got the studios that are desperate to sort of get these movies out, but on the same token, they've got to get a return on this investment. And then at the other end of that spectrum, you've got the cinemas, which are obviously very reliant on movies coming out. Movies aren't coming out, so they're not getting money. It's such a terrible position. I mean, obviously releasing old movies is good, and it's going to generate an income, but it's obviously not, the next James Bond. But I mean, I've kept my eye on
Yeah.
it. There's been some really cool films that have come in, come into the cinema. I mean, this weekend you can see Nightmare on Elm Street, like the original, like, the very first Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, I would never have thought I'd get a chance to see that in the cinema. So
Yeah.
when films like that come around, I think, yeah, like, and I don't think they cost very much. It's like $4.99 a ticket. I mean, you can't really complain about that. So
No, and like, you try and do what you can whilst feeling safe, of course, to go and support these businesses that are desperate for
yeah,
an income and helping
yeah,
be able to pay their employees. It's a terrible situation, and
it is.
Gaming seems to have been largely unaffected. Obviously, production's going to be is a bit different, and we're starting to see some games now being delayed from their initial windows because the impact it's had on keeping things as productive and as fast paced as normal.
Yeah.
But
Well, I think Phil Spencer
game
came out
sales
and
have gone
said,
through the
didn't
roof.
he? I think he came out and said that the 2021 sort of lineup of games are going to be the most affected, or games that would have been slated for release in that year are going to be the most affected because you can only do so much from home. Obviously, certain sort of parts of game development can be done remotely, whether it be, sort of concept art or, sort of environment design or, sort of asset creation. Like you can do some things remotely, but when you look at, things that require like studios, like motion capture studios and things that they've just not been able to get people into, because of lockdown, it's that there's certain parts of the game that you just can't make without going into a studio, and that's obviously been the the hard part, I think, for a lot of companies that have had to work remotely, whilst still sort of keeping to their development, sort of pipeline. So it's it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting, just sort of seeing next year, sort of obviously what games do end up being pushed back further. And I mean, we might have a really barren 2021, but then 2022 might be absolutely crazy with games coming out.
Yeah, as companies start working smarter in terms of how they're able to work these projects remotely and how people collaborate over distance. Obviously a lot of these companies that are doing stuff, every company out there has had to have a learning curve when it comes to this new way going forward. And I think Microsoft have actually gone out and said that employees will be able to permanently work from home now. So as a result of that, they're clearly going to have some type of home working permanently now in their strategy to be able to work their projects going forward.
Yeah.
So, yeah, interesting to see. So yeah, we'll see what happens there. So obviously, we kind of went onto a film and series tangent there, but all good stuff. So yeah, that's impacted my gaming time, but I've still been plugging away with Destiny, and I can say I have finally finished the first Destiny from start to finish. So I've not taken part in any of the raids, apart from the odd one. Not raids, sorry, the strikes. I've not done any. I've not done any of the raids. I've just gone through the main content, which is the main campaign, the Dark Below, House of Wolves, the Taken King, and the what's the last one called? The Rise of Iron. So those are the 5 DLC pieces. I've got to say, without a shadow of a doubt, the Taken King was just the best DLC across all of them. It was really, really engaging to play. So finished that. It was quite satisfying because I've been playing it on the PS4. My launch PS4, which sounds like a helicopter taking off when it comes to playing games like that. But it's nice to put the controller down and then move on to Destiny 2, which is what I've started playing now. And I'm now playing that across Xbox One X, and I'm also playing it on PC as well. So I'm doing a bit of both, depending on where I am in the house and what I'm feeling on that. So, and obviously my criticisms of Bungie's storytelling and how they introduce new players into Destiny 1 in terms of the difficulties of playing the game's content in the right order was a big issue. And nothing could have prepared me for the absolute minefield and just complete incoherentness that Destiny 2 is as a new player joining it. So I've obviously joined Destiny 2 quite late on since it released. It's been out for now, I want to say 3 years, Destiny 2.
Yeah, sounds
Came
about
out
right.
2007. Came out 2017. And obviously in 2017 they had the main campaign.
Yep.
Then they added on the additional DLC like Forsaken and things like that.
I think it was Curse of the Osiris came first.
That's right, yeah. And Warmind and things like that. New storylines they've dropped in. But they came with a new strategy which they decided to welcome new players into the game called the New Light.
Yes.
And the New Light is where you basically, well, my experience, I started the game and the cutscene started and it's the exact same cutscene as Destiny 1. At the beginning, I thought, oh, it's kind of a nice throwback. They're kind of just throwing you back to, oh, this is Destiny 1. Look how nice it looks now with our new fancy graphics engine. And then it drops you in, and then it's like you're level 20 straight away. I'm like, what? I haven't done anything. You know, it's kind of boosted you up to level 20. I've got like loads of gear already. And I thought, this seems really kind of fast, you know, seems a bit unusual, but I'll go with it. And then it makes you go to this town hub sort of thing.
Yep.
And then the main story quest is to compete in strikes to get you to level 770 light, which is the equipment level. And I thought, hang on a minute, you know, the game can't have just eliminated a narrative, a story compared to the first one, because the first one had a storyline that goes through. It turns out that you have to talk to an NPC to actually access the story content from the past expansion. So the beginning of Destiny 2 should start with the town getting the place, the hub, the tower being attacked by the Legion. That's how the game starts, Destiny 2. So obviously I had all this stuff, you know, where it felt like an MMO going in, and they've got like a Halloween event on, and, you know, no real story, just kind of little objectives to do. And I actually had to go out my way to I had to go online to find out where's the story. And it turns out you had to restart. You basically go in and start the story from accessing it from an old menu. So really frustrating that it took me about an hour and a half to try and work out. And in fact, I know people who have started playing Destiny 2 in the past and actually stopped playing it because they just said there wasn't really much of a story. It just seemed quite dull. And I'm thinking it's because they've hidden the story and you can access it if you want. It's classed as almost like legacy content. But unlike Destiny 1...
That makes sense because I was watching one of my friends stream Destiny 2 and she's never played it before. She just started playing it. And I didn't sort of see her start the game. I just sort of joined in, like, I don't know, 10 minutes in. And I looked at the level and thinking, like, she's only just started playing Destiny 2. And I'm looking at this thinking, this isn't the beginning of Destiny 2. Like, this looks like Destiny 1 to me. Like, I'm 99... Like, the only reason I wasn't 100% certain because I'm thinking, like, she is playing Destiny 2. Like, I know she is.
Yeah.
But like I'm not seeing Destiny 2. Like this is really weird. And I remember saying to like one of my friends at the time, you know, who was watching, and you know, and he was like, oh, I don't know, you know, like no idea. And like I played Destiny 2 at launch. I mean, I played it a lot at launch. You know, I played all like the the original. I played up to the original Light Cap. I played all of Curse of Osiris. All of not Forsaken, Warmind. You know, I the first two expansions, up to the first two expansions, Destiny 2 was like my full-time game. Like that's the only game I played. And I remember like watching her play it, thinking like, I know I'm on the wrong side of 30, but like this is this is really really tripping me out. Like I know what I know. You know, it's almost like some Clockwork Orange like going on.
Just an alternate reality where Destiny is not the same game you played.
I was just like, I'm really baffled by this. Like, I just couldn't get my head around it. But obviously, with context, and you now saying like, there's this weird kind of introductory system that they've added. But you know that. Well, okay, now it makes sense. Which
but the worst part of all of that is that you could just go into the game and you would, you know, the game leads you to these objectives and and that's the quest line basically. And you start playing it, and if you're a new player like I was, you could just do that and think that's the game and that's the story. I had to actually go out of my way, find out there's an NPC on the home base that you go to. You talk to that character, and then you can actually accept the old quest line. So obviously the quest line for the main campaign of Destiny 2 when it launched was the Red Line. That was like the start of the game. I think it's called the Red Line. and that's it. You have to really go on. So the game started with this massive frustration and almost kind of thinking that Bungie might have kind of put this game in a position where it's not really as welcoming to. Obviously, there's a lot of content they've put in these campaigns, great soundtracks, great stories, and you could easily miss them because you're now joining in. And this is at a time where Destiny 2's just come to Game Pass with all the DLC as well. So that was a bit frustrating. But what I can say is the actual game itself is fantastic. I started playing the first campaign, followed it in chronological order. I'm quite early on at the moment, but the gameplay is refined. The characters are the abilities that you can go down are really enjoyable, and also as well they've clearly taken the benefits and the positives they got from the Taken King DLCs and the Rise of Iron when it comes to the characters and storytelling that they introduced in those DLCs and just hit the ground running with it on Destiny 2. So I'm really enjoying that. Obviously, like I said earlier, I'm mixing it between PC and Xbox because it's got cross save, not cross play. So I can play on the PC and play on the Xbox. It looks fantastic on the Xbox One X. 4K HDR looks really pretty. Playing it on PC and just running it at 60 FPS is fantastic, and it's so nice, so easy just to kind of seemingly move them across. You literally don't have to do anything. You just enable it in the Bungie.net on your profile, and that's it. It's done. Yeah. So no, I'm well impressed with that. I'm really enjoying it. The campaign and the way that they've changed it. So they've actually got rid of leveling for the characters. They've actually the only way you get leveling now is through your equipment, like light, and that's the thing you chase. So slowly getting through that. Very impressed with the soundtrack as well, and how there's a bit very early on in the game where I'm walking through the mountains, and I was just really blown away by the atmosphere the game generated. I was getting almost like little parts of Skyrim feels in terms of how that game does it really well when you just start wandering the wilderness and the ambient music kicks in and it's a beautiful soundtrack. You can just get lost. I could just go for a wander listening to the Skyrim playlist. So so that was really good.
That's awesome.
So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, and what was it, 14th of October we're recording today. I've got less than a month now to get to the point before they start wiping the worlds and locking them down, such as Titan and things like that. So who knows? I might still have enough time to get there, but it is looking pretty tight now, to say the least.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those things that you're obviously playing Destiny 2 in a different time, and what I went through in my experience is obviously going to differ in your experience. So I think it's yeah, I mean, it'd be nice for you to see some of the things that are in the game but won't be a month from now. But ultimately, if you don't get to it, I wouldn't sort of worry about it. Just enjoy what you're doing. And I mean, it's not like you're planning on getting into raiding on a weekly basis and doing all of the end game like prestige content. You're just playing it really for a story perspective.
Which is interesting actually, because I'm not sure. Obviously, it's been classed as there is a clear focus on getting you to play multiplayer and things like that in this game. Can you play the whole of Destiny 1 in single player? The answer is absolutely, and hopefully the same goes for Destiny 2. Obviously, there's stuff extra that you can do in play with other people, such as the strikes, the raids, the crucible, and things like that.
Yeah.
And I when I catch up and get to the current content, I'm probably going to start dabbling in those things, because at that point I'm not going to go, right, put the controller down, I'm done. I'll just wait for the next DLC to come out. I'll probably explore and see what these other things are, but very good, really enjoying it. And it's nice I've only heard positive things from the fans of Destiny since they've now become independent away from Activision with this title, and they've now got more control over the content they release and the scheduling. So
yeah, I think my sort of gripe with Destiny 2, and it's nothing against the game, it's just what I want from games and what I enjoy in games. And I think what I've become increasingly aware of is that these kind of live service MMOs are very cleverly designed, and the the gameplay cycle and this loop, this kind of having like daily objectives or weekly objectives, this kind of continuous almost pressure to keep playing.
Yeah.
It draws me in like easily. And at some point I become self-aware that like I'm just logging in because I now feel like this pressure to, and I just can't, like once I become self-aware that that's what's happening to me, that's when I cut it off,
Yeah.
and it's very easy to not become self-aware. You sort of think like, okay, like the next expansion's out, like I've got to keep up. Like if I don't keep up, I'm going to get left behind. If I get left behind, then I can't play. And it's crazy. And Destiny 2 is not the only game to do that. MMOs obviously.
I was just going to say, I did see the slow spiral of your sanity when it came to Final Fantasy 14, and slowly seeing that game just kind of take over every. I've got to go on. And I kind of started feeling it as well. In fact, I'd be, it's pretty. It caused some conversations at home when it came to like, like. Matt, are you still playing that game? Yes, I need to do my dailies, and I've also got my weekly to do. It's like, can we watch something? Yeah, I'll watch something after doing my daily. Oh, the squad wiped. Okay, we'll have to do it all again from scratch, sort of thing. And it was so the time consuming, not just per session, but actually the fact that you have to re-enter, redo it, and keep going. And obviously, that's the monetization model, really, isn't it? Keeping you engaged, keeping you tied in, making it so that to get to the end game suddenly becomes a game of grinding for the tiny increases or tiny resources that you get so you can buy the best gear. And then the new expansion hits, and that old gear you've just got then becomes really easy to get. And then it's like, right, the bar's been lifted, and now that grind applies to the new gear that's come out, and rinse and repeat. So
I think
that's particularly why I try and avoid the end game in those type of games going forward.
I think with discipline, like those games really can be the best value for money, because if you take like a subscription to like Final Fantasy or World of Warcraft or any kind of, obviously there's no subscription cost for like Destiny, I mean, or like Xbox Live, if you're playing it on console or PlayStation.
Yeah.
But there isn't really a subscription cost. But if you look at the subscription costs, they're generally in the region of like £5 to £10, say on average.
Yeah.
If you are only planning on playing that game and that game alone, it's not a problem. Like you're definitely going to get your value for money. If you sort of work on the basis that, I don't know, like for every £1 you spend, you want an hour in return. Like you're easily going to get 5 or more hours in a World of Warcraft month or a Final Fantasy month or a Destiny month. Like the question of value for money is not even remotely a consideration. It's when you get into that sort of that habit where it's almost like a job, and I think if you can go on and you can sort of think of it like any other game, like regardless of what I'm doing or where I'm at, if I go on, I'm playing 2 hours tops, 2.5 hours tops, and at that point, regardless of where I am, I log out. It's great. Like you'll never need to buy another game again, if if you're that into it. But it's when it sort of gets into like, I've been playing this for like 7 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, like that's when it gets unhealthy. And I think MMOs in my sort of game play, or my sort of game time, like I love them if there isn't any other games to play, because I can have that discipline. I can go on, I can play a couple hours, get off. But if there's other games to play, like if I was sort of got into like an MMO now, less than a month from now, we've got Cyberpunk coming out. Like I'm not gonna not play Cyberpunk to play Final Fantasy or play Destiny or play whatever. So, I think that for me is that's when it kind of becomes self-aware, when I realize like I'm actually not playing other games that I want to play because I've got to log in and keep going with this sort of progression arc, and that's when it kind of becomes a problem. So it's an interesting one. Do you know what I mean? I can sort of see it from both sides because I've kind of been on both sides, but I think it's just you've got to have that discipline. If you don't have the discipline, then they are bad games to play because they don't have ends. There is no game ending. There's no credits. You keep playing.
Yeah, that's it. Keep going, and I suppose that's kind of the void that obviously games like Fortnite and things like they do now. They don't have end games when it comes to the content that you get or the grind. They just replace that with microtransactions, so you can get the new loot by paying for it and kind of speeding up that process. And part of the appeal for those type of games, particularly when it comes to games that are like targeted at children, like Fortnite, is there's almost like you get new items on the battle pass and things like that. It's something that you can like show off to your friends and things like that. It's something that I've observed in my daughter. And when the new battle pass comes out, they want to get the new battle pass because it's got some new outfits on,
Yeah.
and you can feel in on it. And it's obviously that's the kind of appeal when you're playing these MMOs, when you get to the end game and you feel almost like part of the elite, because you can do the elite raid, you've got the best equipment, you can do the best DPS, and you can access some of the raids that only a handful of people can. So it's
Yeah, but I'd say
interesting how games turn.
I'd say with Fortnite, not playing Fortnite, but obviously being familiar with battle passes, at least there's kind of like a chaptered end. Like once you get to level 80, if it's an 80 level battle pass, once you get to level 80, you have done the battle pass. So there is an ending
Until next month.
technically until another But then if you're continuing to play the game, that's fine. But I think my point is with MMOs, there isn't ever an end. Like there literally isn't ever an end. Like when you get to like end game raiding, then there's like, if you get into like a random group and you're doing, or if it's an established group and you're raiding on a weekly basis, you're not going to get all of the gear that you want in 1 week. Like you've got to raid continuously week in, week out. And even if you get your gear, you still got to keep raiding for other people to get their gear. Like it's, and then there's always other quests to do. There's other things to level up. Like MMOs, I think, are on a whole other level when it comes to, progression and there not being an end. Like they're literally, there is not an end to World of Warcraft. Like there is always something to do. Literally always something to do. But at least with like Fortnite, once you've done the battle pass, you've done the battle pass. Yeah, you can always keep playing the game, but there isn't always something to do necessarily. So it's
I think the end game, the end, you can achieve that, but then, like say, in a month's time or so, then it starts again, and that new end, and that's also like with when these MMOs, the end game changes, that's when that all happens as well. So, but either way, both both those type of things, you could fall down a rabbit hole quite quickly. So
you fall down a rabbit hole with any game, but at least with single player games, there's credits. I think that's my point. If there's credits in a game, then you know when you've got to the end. So.
Yeah, and there's usually a percentage bar at the bottom when it's something like an open world game or something like that, where you could complete the main story in 50 hours, but then all the extra stuff and the exploration. So although there is that, talking about things like Skyrim, there is still that I forget her name now. She's that grandma. She's like the grandma of Skyrim, I think she's nicknamed, and
right.
she streams. She's like 85 years old, and she streams Skyrim, and she's been like, what? Oh, it's unbelievable to watch. She like proper goes into like the lore, and that's all she plays and all she streams, and she's like being widely recognized by Bethesda and see, it's quite a funny stream to watch, and just really goes into. I think she's obviously like read all the books in Skyrim and. Just goes out and just explores, and just that's all she plays. But those little icons that all appear on the map on Skyrim, there's no doubt she's explored every single one of them and things like that. So, but that game doesn't have a percentage bar.
I swear, there's a grandma on every big game. Like I've watched a grandma playing World of Warcraft. Like there is I remember seeing a grandpa playing Call of Duty, and he like swears at teenagers because they killed them and stuff. Like, do you know what I mean? That there is an old person playing every game.
Yeah.
But then to be fair, like we're getting to a point where like people that were in their I don't know like 40s in the 80s, obviously like a real like boom in gaming. And now potentially in their 80s now, it's I think we're at a point where there are elderly gamers who have been gaming all their lives, and I certainly don't imagine either one of us are going to be stopping anytime soon. So all the power to them. They're sort of laying the way for future senior gamers.
Yeah, making it more widespread. Gaming's, typically when it's like in States or the UK, it's or other places, it's always been frowned upon by the elderly, typically just because of the stories that came out. There was that whole furore when Mortal Kombat 2 was coming out. I think it was Mortal Kombat, and it was like on Fox News. It was, games are really bad. They're really violent. There was games like Doom. They were satanic, going against Christian household values and all that kind of stuff. And those people then obviously, end up running Congress or going on. And obviously the only way that you can get past those kind of things is when there's people leave, and the people that grew up with the video games as norm then get into those positions and change the narrative and the conversation around them. I mean, how many times is it that video games are blamed for rising violence or things like that, or violent acts? And it'll always happen like that way until the people actually making those decisions about how to regulate games and stuff actually have played them. Because I'm pretty confident that, particularly in the States, when you look at the Senate, and you're looking at all the faces around there, most of them have ever seen a computer game or even played a computer game before. They've just heard what they are and think they are every single computer game is Grand Theft Auto 5, and not just Grand Theft Auto 5, Grand Theft Auto 5 when you're simply playing the game in the most worst way possible.
Yeah.
Now that's their opinion of that. So it'll get there eventually, and it will become widely more accepted across the areas. I'm looking forward to when I'm 80 and I'm playing Halo 2 LAN parties at the care home on an evening. That's my ideal setup.
Halo 2, not Halo 1.
No, can't stand Halo 1.
Not very good at Halo 1, are you? No?
Not good. No, don't enjoy it at all. So.
There's a story there for another time.
Yeah. Well, so obviously they're the two games I've been playing more, but but not in any great detail. I think Destiny is definitely the one that's eating up the most of my time. So, and of course you've not played anything. So, so moving on, then we'll move into the news of the show and kind of talk through the big news from the news highlights from this week, or maybe not even big news, just kind of stuff that we want to talk about, things that we've seen. And I suppose I'll kick things off this week with the videos that have started to come out now, and the article about the Xbox Series S and X and how backwards compatibility is going to work on those consoles.
Yeah.
Obviously, Microsoft is now kind of going forward with an approach how they're going to preserve and respect your gaming legacy, is what they say on the blog post. But basically, the idea is that the games that are going to be from the original Xbox 360 and Xbox One are all going to be playable on the newer consoles. We know this already, but they are going to have enhancements due to the power, due to the machines and how they're looking at them. So just kind of running through the highlights on what they mentioned on the website. Obviously, there's going to be an increase in loading speeds because they're going to be running off the NVMe SSDs, which are central to the console. They're going to be running in high resolution. They're also going to be able to run at higher frame rates as well if the frame rate is unlocked or the frame rate becomes unlocked. So one of the big things that we've seen is games that have notoriously been really choppy because the frame rate is just unlocked rather than fixing it at a solid 30, or they try to hit 60 but they just don't hit 60 and they're up and down, up and down. The Xbox new consoles are just going to brute force them through and basically force the higher frame rates. You also got HDR. So HDR is going to be working on games that don't have HDR enabled as a standard. So original Xbox games wouldn't have had HDR. They didn't even know what HD was at the time, I can imagine, or true HD anyways. So they're now getting it implemented through a clever use of AI. And they showed off the video. I don't know if you saw this, Dan, but they showed off the video of Fallout 4 running on the Xbox Series S. And obviously that had a capped frame rate on the Xbox One at 30 FPS.
Yeah.
However, they've removed the frame rate and actually been able to double it. And there's now they're saying that it's going to be able to play at a full 60 frames a second. So what's nice to see here is that they actually are not just having the games, obviously no benefit. It would be pretty poor if you wouldn't see any benefit on games with 30 FPS or locked at 30 FPS. So they're actually going in and removing some of these locks and being able to run them at a solid 60 frame, which, obviously if you're a PC gamer, you've already had this before, but on consoles, it's a complete new. and having the ability to improve textures and give things HDR that didn't have HDR enabled is just nice, and being able to just have all these generations of games on one console, all with expected enhancements, is quite nice. There's nothing worse than when you pull out the old PlayStation or an old console and you plug it into your new TV and it looks horrendous, because then you've got to go and find a new, an old TV on eBay, try and find a decent CRT, and if they break, then unless you know how to fix it, or someone else who can fix it, you're pretty stuffed. So it's a nice alternative to people who are not purists in that sense, having all the old kit, but there's a nice working alternative for the mainstream. So did you see all this
I didn't.
this article?
No, I saw some sort of tweets about Fallout running at 60 frames a second, but I'm not particularly interested in Fallout, so didn't really look into it. But no, I mean, I don't really. I think the problem in terms of asking me about the sort of the Series X and what's happening, I'm just not paying much attention to it because I'm not getting one at launch. So I guess in a way to not tempt myself into purchasing something I don't need to purchase, I'm deliberately distancing myself from something that
trying to avoid
I'm not getting at launch. So I don't really have much sort of investment in knowing what's happening. So I think to that end, what's happening with the PS5 is probably I'm probably a bit more informed on. But my understanding with the backwards compatibility on the Xbox is that it's not a case of you can play like every original Xbox or 360 game that was ever made. It's you can play every Xbox and 360 game that is backwards compatible on the Xbox One. So any games that were taken forward to that console, you can play on the Series X. That's my understanding. Is that right?
That is at the moment, yeah. They announced I think it was last week, that they've now stopped adding more new games to the Xbox One X backwards compatibility update program. Right. So they've stopped doing that. But my understanding is that they're going to continue look at these going forward to add them to Series X. So the library should get bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah. So there are going to be gaps, of course, but
it's just what's already compatible on the Xbox One.
Yeah, and that's so exactly on at launch, and there's quite a lot there. But for me, my biggest bugbear is I love Burnout 3 Takedown. I've got a digital copy of that on my 360, and it is stuck on my 360 because it is not playable on Xbox One
compatible. So so at the moment it won't be on the Series X unless they bring that. Unless they bring it forward, okay. I mean, I think that's cool. I mean, I think it's certainly it's good that they're enhancing the performance of these games. It will. I guess it'll be interesting to see whether or not there's any adverse effects to enhancing the performance, because I don't know whether or not the problem would be replicated on console, but on PC, if you play Skyrim at anything over 60 frames a second, it just melts. Like, I mean, unless there's like serious modding and scripting and whatever. For me, just being a bog standard gamer, if I don't cap Skyrim at 60 frames a second, it does not work like at all. So it'd be interesting to see what happens on console, I guess.
Well, my understanding is they have an actual team dedicated at Microsoft to basically test them and sign them off as playable on the console.
Right.
And I suppose the difference between PC and console is that with PC, there's you're aiming for so many different types of setups and GPUs and CPUs, whereas with the consoles, that right, this game will look and perform like this on the Xbox One S, this will perform like this on the Xbox One X, and you can there's less profiles that you have to manage a console too. So we'll see.
Has there been any discussion as to whether or not these games will have online capability?
Interesting. I don't think I've seen anything about that, but I am aware of some of the older games did have access to online. For example, Star Wars Battlefront 2, that has full access to the online servers. They are still working. So I would assume that is definitely something they would look at. But there's nothing that is just an assumption. There's nothing I've seen in the article that blog post
Because the
or what I've seen elsewhere.
original Xbox Live is completely dead. Like you can't go online, you can't connect to this. The servers are gone. But I mean, if I could go back and play, I don't know, like Rainbow Six 3 from the original Xbox, if I could play that online, like that. If they announced that, that's almost like a launch day seller for me.
That's it. You would have no. That's it. It'd no longer be a question of if you get an Xbox One X. It's going to be I'm getting one.
You can keep your Halo Infinites and your Forzas and whatever. Like if Rainbow Six 3 is backwards compatible online day one, then that is a significant game changer. But I've not seen anything to confirm that there'll be any online functionality, and I don't think Rainbow Six is even backwards compatible yet, is it, on the Xbox One? I think it's not one of those that made the journey.
No, the in terms of the actual original Xbox games, the number there is quite limited. There is, I want to say there's 39 games on backwards compatibility on the original Xbox.
Yeah.
And 4 of those games are Splinter Cell, Double Agent, Pandora Tomorrow, and Chaos Theory. And they do have online elements as well. So I would assume that they have some type of network interaction, but which is implemented for the backwards compatibility. So we'll see.
I don't think that's the case though. With multiplayer, I'm almost certain that the multiplayer functionality doesn't work.
I'll have to have a look because with Games with Gold, they usually include an Xbox 360 game in the Games with Gold. And last month they included Red Faction 2, which did have online multiplayer, I think. Or was it
you
just
say
local?
360 because I think we're talking about original Xbox.
No, Xbox original and Star Wars Battlefront 2. That was Xbox original.
Yeah,
and that had
was
online.
Yeah.
So I think I've got both of them as well. So. Although I actually think you're right. I'm looking at the features now on the page, and it says offline players 1 to 4 and system link 1 to 4. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure that online isn't a thing with any of those games, because I remember that I remember sort of being super hyped when they announced like, oh, okay, like original Xbox games are going to be backwards compatible on the Xbox One. Like, that's amazing. And then you see the list, and you think, okay, like there's not that many, and then like, oh, none of these games have multiplayer. It's just like it just completely sucks the air out of the room. But
yeah, hopefully that changes in the future.
Maybe.
I mean, that would be a real benefit to being able to play this, because that would actually give you features over your existing hardware. You'd have a situation where you could not play the original version on your Xbox online, but then if you put that into a Series X, you can then play online again. There's plenty of examples of fan-made versions, but of course they're having an official version.
The original Xbox Live's coming back as Insignia. I think we talked about that.
Yeah, the fan-made project online. Yeah. So, but we'll see.
That sounds interesting.
Hopefully they can bring stuff back, and like I say, that would be a massive benefit to be able to play those old games with multiplayer. Because some of those games, the best experiences playing on them were the multiplayer online. So
yeah, absolutely.
We'll keep an eye on that.
It was a weird time. I mean, a lot of it won't go on a tangent here because I could probably talk for hours about the original Xbox Live. But I would say online gaming then was a lot different, and it was. I'd say the most notable difference is that when you played, something like Rainbow Online or Mech Assault or 13, some of these sort of very early Xbox Live games, you could play those games night in, night out, and you would come across the same people again and again and again. Obviously now, if you play a game of Call of Duty online, the chances of you running into the same person twice, very, very minimum. Like it's just almost impossible that you see the same players again and again. But it's sort of the community back then was a lot smaller, and it was a lot more intimate because of that. So it's sort of, and obviously that's just online gaming has just got a massive. There's more people doing it, so it's sort of obvious to say that you're not likely to see the same people again and again. But
yeah. And a big element as well, obviously the community was a lot smaller back then, and as it started to grow, you still had things like game chat and game lobbies, which were the only way you could communicate in those games, and that's how you meet people. Now, sadly, online gaming is just people in their own little bubbles talking with their own friends in a private thing, and it kind of lessens the appeal of certain these games. And some games are quite good in that they almost force you to, not force you, but you can hear the interactions, like Sea of Thieves, for example, or some of the classic Halos. They've still got proximity chat on, so you can still hear. But again, that's assuming that people aren't using third-party software, and it's just not
Yeah.
the same.
Yeah,
Sadly,
there's
it was a golden era. It really was a golden era of online gaming, and obviously now it's just become the norm. It's kind of watered down, sadly.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Back on the start on the nostalgia drive. Then back on the way that online gaming was and
The
the
good old days.
state of it now. So yeah, that's my first bit of news. What have you got for us, Dan?
Well, we're talking about the Xbox. Did you see that sort of controversy or scare with the pre-orders through Currys and PC World?
No.
The sort of, yeah, I was reading about it earlier today, and customers that had, to their knowledge, secured pre-orders were sent emails saying that the console had increased price, or the sort of pre-order price of the consoles had gone up by like over £2,000.
Right.
And what it turned out to be, once I'd sort of read into it a little bit more, is they increased the price of the sort of pre-order price, but at the same time emailed the customers that had secured these pre-orders with coupon codes of like £2,000, so they could deduct that from the retail price of like £2,445 or whatever.
Right.
So it deducts the £2,000 off that transaction, and then they have to pay the 445 or £250 for the console. And I think the intention here is that they've implemented this system to get round scalpers and to get round bots that will comb websites for new pre-order listings, because I think
Yeah.
their sort of theory is that the sort of 2,000 plus price tag would deter bots from scooping up pre-orders because of the additional fee. It's not the sort of the 445 that the consoles were announced for. So I thought it was interesting. I mean, the sort of the headline of the article, it sort of is quite shocking. You think, oh my god, like currently the PC World like actually charging people £2,500 for consoles, and they're not. It's just they've put this in place to sort of combat the issue with scalpers and bots. And I thought,
Interesting.
yeah, I thought that. I think the controversy has been in the wording of the email and the scare, and how
They
it's
didn't
kind
tell
of.
people before, basically. Just did it.
Yeah, I think people that thought they had a pre-order, and then it's like, oh my god, do I have one, or do I have to pay another £2,000? Like, and of course, people being people, people that have received this offer of, having the sort of the £2,000 coupon to take off console. You can't use it on something else. You can't just go on a shopping spree now. But
Yeah.
there's already eBay listings of people saying, if you purchase this, I will give you, the pre-order code so that you can go on and
Yeah.
redeem
Fat
a console.
chance.
Yeah, people are buying them. There was one on there that had a bid of £100. So in effect, they were buying a Series X for £540 rather than 445. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. People the lengths that people will go to, to make a bit of money.
Yeah, and also as well, like the people that would, be willing to pay that much more. I did about you, but if I missed out on the consoles, I would just been, I'd been like, fair enough, I missed out on them. They're going to sell more eventually, so I'm just happy to wait. I'm not going to go, right, I'm going to pay an extra £200 just so I can play it on launch
Yeah.
days. It
I,
just seems
I think there's a lot of
crazy.
people though that don't have that rationale, or they do, but then they quickly it quickly goes out the window when they, when they see on social media, the hype and consoles are selling out. And obviously we're in the build up to Christmas. It's the winter season, so people are spending more time indoors, and, people then start worrying about being left behind. And people forget, this sort of launch of consoles. Xbox and PlayStation are not saying, or Microsoft and PlayStation aren't saying, like, you've only got one opportunity to buy an Xbox. You've only got one opportunity to buy a PlayStation. Like, they're going to be making and selling these consoles for at least the next several years. So, if you don't get one at launch, it's not really a big deal. Like, it really isn't, and I think a lot of people forget that in the sort of the hype, and it's,
and even more so with these new consoles, because most of the games at launch are going to be playable on the existing hardware. We know this already. We know that Xbox games are going to, games that are coming out are going to be playable on Xbox One and Xbox One X. It's like Halo Infinite and all that kind of thing. And also as well with PlayStation initially said none of our games are going to be backwards compatible. All going to be playable on PS4 with purely focusing on PS5. And then as we got close to release date, we found out that wasn't true, because you can play Miles Morales on that console, you can play on PS4, you can play Ratchet and Clank on PS4, and you can play Horizon Forbidden West on the PS4. Obviously, they're going to look better on the newer console, but then it kind of, people who are quite happy, someone who maybe bought a PS4 Pro recently, and they just sat there with it and thinking, oh, well, I don't need to buy a new console because I can play the game that I want to play. I can play on this one that I've got, and I've just forked out for it. So particularly if you've got a nice looking console like the Last of Us version or the Spider-Man PS4, having to leave that behind could be so soon after you've just purchased it could be quite sad, because I think the Last of Us 2 console came out, a version of the PS4 came out with the game, and that was June, yes, that's not long. And by that point, we already knew that there were PS5s just around the corner. So
yeah, but then I think people that bought those consoles at that time knew that we were coming to the end of the console cycle. Like, I mean, when you buy like a limited edition console like that, you're not buying it just because it's a PlayStation. You're buying it because it's a keepsake. It's a timestamp. It's a dedication to a game that you love, and it's almost like a mantelpiece. Like, you can have that on display, forever, and it's always going to look cool. It's always going to symbolize, the game that it represents. So I certainly don't think anybody that's bought those consoles will have buyer's remorse, thinking like, oh, the PlayStation 5's out now, like, I shouldn't have bought that. But
and the console looks really nice as well. Although I think you'd have buyer's remorse if you got one of the digital Xbox One S's, because that came out quite recently, and also as well, the announcement of the console when the the Xbox Series S was announced, the pricing, it was actually the same price as getting an Xbox One S, which I still don't understand. In fact, the prices haven't budged. I'm quite surprised by that. I was expecting that when the Series S came out, that you'd see a drop in the prices of the current consoles, but they haven't budged. I reckon we'll probably see some more considerable sell-off sales on Black Friday around the corner, but
let's talk about buyer's remorse on Christmas morning when all of the kids open their Xbox One X's.
Yeah, expecting the Series X because they made a boo-boo.
Oh, this doesn't look like it did in the pictures. Oh, it's an Xbox One X, son. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. I got you the Xbox. You asked for the Xbox.
You asked for the Xbox X. I've got you one of those.
Just throw out the window. Well, I suppose that's an interesting point with curries. I think, when you initially mentioned that, I kind of thought, right, curries are now the most disliked gaming, selling the new hardware. And then very quickly that turned out not to be the case, and it's back to game, charging you £10 for delivery. So, yeah, we'll see.
I just
think it's quite clever, though.
There's got to be other ways around it. I think it's... I don't know. It's so frustrating that the ushering in of a new generation should be nothing but positive and happiness and yes, excitement. But then it's just marred by scalpers and bots, and it's like ticket touts. Just get out of my way. I want to get into the gig and see the band. Like,
yeah, it's just not good.
You just don't want to deal with that stuff. Like, it's just such a stain on what should be an exciting time for everyone. And
yeah, and I think you made quite a good point there, in that it happens across all industries. It isn't just gaming. You know, your gig tickets, there's always going to be a percentage of people that buy them and no one else can buy them and then sell them on afterwards. So
Yeah.
it is a shame because particularly if you want to be there on day one, you know, the only way you can do is by paying a premium. And I've seen it quite a lot with limited run games and things like that where the games just disappear, and they've done quite well to try and eliminate that by and some companies I saw as well by limiting how many people can buy them. So, you know, one console per customer or per account, but then people set up multiple accounts and then send them to different addresses and things like that. I mean, people will go to great lengths to be able to scalp them, but there is a little bit of justice out there because I have seen online when people have advertised poorly on eBay, they put their listing on, and then people are able to find the listing and then go and contact the company and basically cancel the pre-order, so they don't go get it.
Yeah, it's all of those. It's amazing.
So, you know, even though it is slightly illegal, it's you know, there is a nice bit of justice is served that we can all gather around and enjoy. So
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you got anything else? Any other snippets or?
Well, the thing that has kind of been going around, it's been, you know, rumors have been spiraling for a while now about this, about the Mass Effect Legendary Collection, Legendary Edition, sorry, which is a remaster of Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3. Early on, when EA were talking about remasters, when everyone else was doing them, they said they didn't really believe in them, which was a little bit upsetting because I really wanted to play Dead Space remastered on the consoles, but it's never going to happen. And seeing as it's EA, I don't think we're ever going to get a 4K patch for them either. But this Mass Effect rumor just hasn't gone away, and it still hasn't been confirmed by EA. But we've now seen an official rating in South Korea, an age rating. So this isn't this isn't just putting a trademark out there or anything like that. You know, there's an age rating, which means that, you know, it's been certified. It's now pretty much confirmed that this will be coming out, which would be quite cool. The rumors have been, though, that this was meant to be coming out this year, but the rumors now are saying that it's going to come out next year because the team have been having some real difficulty porting the original game, because the original game, I don't know if you've played Mass Effect 1 recently, but out of the three Mass Effects, that is the game that's just aged the worst in terms of the controls and how it plays and how it feels, and obviously the jokes about lift sequences where you'd sit in the lift with all your characters for about an hour because the game is loading in the new content, you know, still exists now even on faster hardware, and it's, you know, it just doesn't play very well. So hopefully we'll see that soon. Are you, you know, I know you're a big fan of Mass Effect 2. Were you excited for a trilogy to replay them all remastered?
I think I'm sort of at a point, and I think that this point is being emphasized because of the fact that we're on the cusp of ushering in a new era of games and consoles.
Yeah.
But I think I'm sort of at a point where, like, I'm over this sort of constant revisiting of old games and old IPs and remastering and bringing games back from the dead and putting on a new coat of paint, or, you know, just it's cool, and I think my excitement for these projects is for the people that didn't get to experience it the first time around, and they're being given a second chance. I think that's a really good thing, and it's really positive. And you know, if people can enjoy Mass Effect that didn't get to play it, or kids that, you know, weren't old enough to play it then, but they've now obviously grown up a bit more and they can play it now and enjoy it the way it was intended, then, you know, that's great. You know, I think these projects do have a worthwhile cause, but I think for me, I'm just not as excited about things like, oh, Mass Effect's coming back, or, you know, the Master Chief Collection. Like, I mean, ODST came out on the Master Chief Collection recently. I didn't even play it, and ODST is probably my favorite Halo next to, like, the original Halo. So it's like, I sort of, on one hand, it's like, I think it's really great, but on the other hand, like, me personally, I'm just not as bothered, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's fair enough. I think obviously enhancements and bells and whistles, it's nice. It's a nice nostalgia trip to go back to them. I think for me, the thing I'm most excited about is when they come to the handheld. So obviously I played Skyrim on Switch I'd played Skyrim on everything on the original 360 on PC. Playing it on the handheld was just a completely great and a new experience. It was great to go back to. So being able to play Mass Effect 1, 2, 3 in a portable setting on the go just seems like a great way to revisit the series. And I think revisiting series, particularly ones that have been, it's been that long since playing the original Mass Effect or Mass Effect 2. I mean, what they came out, I want to say Mass Effect 2 came out in 2007, 2008, was it? It's quite
The original
quite some
Mass
time ago.
Effect, yeah, I'd
Yeah,
say
quite
so,
some
yeah.
time. And those, you're thinking about the story and the, what was at the time. It'd be nice to go back and see those games and see what they do to them as well, kind of seeing how they make them run better would be interesting. And, maybe if there was a Dragon Age remaster, that'd be something that you'd be more interesting, because I know you love the first Dragon Age Origins. I think actually you prefer Dragon Age Origins more to Mass Effect. Is that right?
Ooh, I've never been asked that. I'd say I definitely prefer Dragon Age Origins over the first Mass Effect.
Yeah.
I liked the first Mass Effect. That's not a knock on that game. I liked it.
No.
Um, but I don't know. Like I mean, they're made by the same developer. I don't feel a need to say that one franchise is better than the other.
No, it's not.
I
It's not
think
about that so much. What's your preference in terms of the two? Which one did you enjoy the most?
it's just such an impossible question. It's so hard to say. I mean, sort of retrospectively, my memory is that I was more addicted to Dragon Age Origins than I was Mass Effect 2. I certainly remember playing Dragon Age Origins like I've never played any game before.
Yeah,
Well, that's not true. Any BioWare game before, should we say?
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, your question is which do I prefer? I guess Dragon Age, but I mean, there's not much in it. Mass
No,
Effect 2 and the Mass Effect franchise is amazing. Like, and I'd say as far as Dragon Age Origins is the only one I enjoyed. Like, I
I
didn't
was just
do
gonna
the second
say,
one, and Inquisition, I got bored fairly quickly. So, whereas Mass Effect, they've all been good, really.
yeah. So you'd probably say Mass Effect as a series overall, but Dragon Age Origins over any.
Individually,
Yeah,
yeah, individually, Dragon Age Origins is probably the best BioWare game.
yeah. Oh yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that. I think Dragon Age Origins is just a fantastic game, start to finish. It improved on the almost like the kind of combat mechanics that the Knights of the Old Republic had, and
Yeah,
kind of made something of its own. And it really did have completely different narrative stories depending on which line that you chose and how you're treated by society depending on the race you were. And a lot of that changed. Obviously, Dragon Age 2, you could only play as Hawk, was it? And it was very
I didn't play it much. I played about half
no.
an hour. So,
Yeah, I mean, I played through, but it wasn't enjoyable. It
yeah.
wasn't enjoyable, and it wasn't half as enjoyable as the first one. A very similar experience to you. The third Dragon Age was very bloated, very, you know, very dull in places. And I think I mentioned before in one of the earlier podcasts, the thing that puts me off games is when you can start to see the, behind the veil. You kind of see how what the game is doing and how it works. And it felt like you would complete in a center of an area of all the objectives and everything, and you'd go to the next area, and then it would just make you do all the new side filler storylines just
Yeah.
to increase your character a little bit, or you could do the main story, but you couldn't do the main story just on its own because it was too hard. And then you go to the next area and it would just rinse and repeat icons all over the map. And it was very early on in the open world craze, so to speak. It
Yeah.
didn't land half as well. So no,
I
I
think,
I think I agree with all your comments there.
yeah, and to add to that, I think my issue with Dragon Age Inquisition was the just the spike in difficulty. Like, you'd be cruising in one area and you'd be doing like really well, and you'd just be slicing through like all the enemies, and then like you'd inadvertently stray into like a different area that's not even like clearly different. It's just a
Yeah,
little bit further along than where you were, and suddenly you're fighting things that are like 14 times your level, and it's like, oh, and you just get annihilated. It's like, what?
Yeah,
Like,
and it's forcing you to do the side quests, which are kind of quite mundane and repetitive. A lot of fetch quests to boost your character up so that you can do that,
yeah,
and then you go to the next area, and then it's rinse and repeat over and over again to ad nauseum. It was pretty pretty slow. Although one thing I will say that that game did very well, really well, was how it handled the transition from Xbox 360 to Xbox One in terms of how it carried on the story. So when the game first came out, you could go onto the website and you could confirm the choices that you'd made in the previous games, and then they would actually carry on in Dragon Age Inquisition. So obviously, Dragon Age 1 particularly had some really big decisions that you could make, Dragon Age Origins, that could impact the story completely and how the game ends. And same to a lesser extent with number 2, but there were still some changes there. So the fact you could actually carry on the story the way that you had experienced it in Dragon Age Inquisition was a massive benefit. And I think, it's a shame that more games don't do that. It's one of the things that game did well, albeit I didn't want to see it through because I couldn't be bothered. But hopefully when the new Mass Effect comes out, they'll do something very similar to that, and you could confirm the choices that you made as Shepard, and the choice that you made at the end of Mass Effect 3, how that carries on into Mass Effect 4, which is rumored to be in development as well. So
yeah, it's an interesting sort of thought, but yeah, I mean, I think as far as BioWare, I mean, I think I remember seeing something about the next Dragon Age as well. That's sort of
yeah.
rumored to be in development, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, well, they've confirmed it's in development. I think they needed to confirm something quite quickly, but after the debacle they've had with
Yeah.
Mass Effect Andromeda, and then Anthem came out, which fell really flat on its backside. But BioWare was in a quite a precarious situation. So I think I can't remember what event it was, but they actually mentioned, they showed off like, this, we are making Dragon Age 4. It is in development.
Yeah,
We
I
are
thought it was
working
the
on it.
thing.
So
Yeah, yeah.
so that'll be good. Hopefully they take the lessons that they learned, because Mass Effect 3 got an absolute ribbon because of the ending. I didn't think the ending was fantastic, but I don't think it was anywhere near the level that it
Well, they essentially changed it through
hate.
DLC, though, didn't they? In the end.
Yeah, but did it need that? Should they have stuck to their guns? I suppose that's a whole conversation. Could be another conversation for another time. But
Yeah.
Ultimately they that landed on a sour note. Then the Mass Effect Andromeda came out, which was just a complete broken mess, and the story was dull, and they didn't have the protagonist in it, obviously, from the ones that you enjoyed from the previous games. And then Anthem's come out, and it just is apparently one of the most dullest games that are out there, and trying to step into this persistent online world, market that all these other games are in, like The Division
Yeah,
is
live
in, things like
service.
that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Yeah, so hopefully they managed to nail this one. I could think, and I do think that this could be their last shot. Really, EA as a publisher are widely known to, tell studios, no, you're not making another game. That's it, you're done. So hopefully, they get one more shot and they knock it out of the park. Because I would love to see a return to BioWare. There was a time where you would probably rank Bethesda, BioWare equal in terms. In fact, in some instances, you'd actually, rank Bethesda, BioWare over Bethesda in terms of their ability of storytelling, and they've just kind of fallen by the wayside. And Bethesda have obviously done the same as well. They're not regarded in as high stead as they used to. Bethesda Game Studios, I should say. But there are other game studios that have persistently remained strong in terms of like Obsidian and things like that. So I'm confident, fingers crossed for them, that when this Dragon Age 4 comes out, it really, does blow everyone away, and they get back to the roots.
The movie quote that comes to mind as we're talking about these studios and their falls from grace is the Batman quote, where he says, like, you either die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain.
Yeah.
And I think that's so true with like a lot of these studios, that like when they've stayed around and longevity is their crime. Like they should have died, and they should have died, going out in a blaze of glory. Like, here's Skyrim, and we're never making another game again. Like, but it's like they sort of outstay their welcome, and they stay around long enough to like mess things up, or release a broken game, or say something controversial, or it's sort of way of looking at it, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think it happens to most game developers. I mean, look, you look 3 years ago, and everyone was riding high about how CD Projekt Red were, the best in the game industry. This is an independent game studio that's making big budget games, and they make all these other games look crap in comparison because they get the amount of free content they give away. Look, The Witcher 3's got 16 free DLCs, whilst in Oblivion, or Skyrim, you can buy horse armor. It's amazing how quickly those things change, because now people are seeing CD Projekt Red in the same kind of, well, trying to. I don't think they are. I don't know what the agenda is, but it seems like people do want to sometimes drive the narrative, and when someone's up and on a high, kind of kick them to the curb or put them down. So.
Yeah,
it does. It happens to everyone. It seems like in the gaming industry, what you want to do is make a game on your own that isn't that successful, and no one will hate you because of it.
I think I mean, I don't pretend to understand like the business side of game development, but like I can certainly empathize with the difficulty, and that you've got to generate money, you've got to produce something which you have to get a return on your investment. You can't pay a dev team to make a really expensive AAA game, release that game, and then not get that money back. Like,
oh yeah, of course,
games are businesses for these companies. Like, they've got to be successful, they've got to get money back, but then they've got to do that whilst walking the tightrope of being consumer friendly and not deterring a player base because of microtransactions or things that that would deter a fan base from playing it. It's such a difficult balance to get right.
Yeah, and you're never going to make everyone happy as well. I think the whole conversation back to the game pricing. You look at games; they have not gone up in price since the PS4 came out. That's the exceptional long period of time, and during that period of time, people's wages increased by inflation. Game costs are increasing constantly all the time, and big budget games are costing more and more and more. Look at CD Projekt, looking at Cyberpunk. They're expecting it's going to cost them $100 million to make, and that's going to be the total. Obviously, they're going to get more money on the back end when they get that, when they expect to make they expect to make $500 million in net profit if they meet their sales expectations, but they don't get that money until they actually release the game. So during that point, they're just eating that cost within their development teams, and particularly a company like CD Projekt Red, who is an independent game studio. They don't have the benefit of having a publisher's funds and like Activision or EA to fund their projects and keep them going as a result. So
yeah. I mean, I suspect there's a lot of business to these sort of projects that obviously neither one of us are, very much aware of. I'd certainly like to know more. If anyone happens to be listening that does know more, let us know, drop us a message, send us a DM. But I think it's, from a very basic, sort of perspective, I think there's a lot more that obviously we're not aware of, and I almost, it's sort of with some regret, when you sort of think like it's sort of the exception rather than the rule when you see a company do something really consumer friendly. Like it shouldn't be a surprise, but it is. And like the most recent example is Ghost of Tsushima and their sort of update, and they're adding co-op and sort of new content within the game, and things that other companies, other publishers, studios would charge people for, and it's a free addition to the game, and you sort of look at it and think like, what really it's free? Like it's that shouldn't be a surprise, but it is. It's just the way it is at the moment,
and that's it. These companies are exploring ways to be able to increase their revenue, because when costs increase, they need to be able to increase the revenue to be able to match that, and sometimes they get it right, sometimes they get it wrong. But there's, for example, looking at things like the Epic Store, developers are looking at the Epic Store simply because Epic take a smaller percentage of every game sale through there than other competitors. But just by doing that alone, that causes such a furore with the audience, the gaming community, because they don't want to play on the Epic Store, which I can understand. It's your preference of choice, but then some games won't even get made because they because they don't have those type of avenues. And I can't remember which game it was now. There was a game quite recently, a game that was looked forward to, and they basically said we have to release on Epic first because we won't be able to release this game in any way, shape or form unless we can do that, and
Yeah.
even with that plea and quite candid conversation that they had, they still got it in the neck. They still got furore about it. It's basically, well, what do you want? Do you want no game or some game? And
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. There are deals that are made. There's exclusivity deals like Bayonetta 2 would not exist if Nintendo hadn't picked up the game and released it exclusively on their console.
Yeah.
So
I think some people do just look for a reason to be outraged, though. I think that's I think it's a very common thing now, especially on social media. I think people are outraged about things that they don't even really care about. It's just that it's, what will get the most likes, what will get the most retweets. I think that's a sort of a theme in general, with people these days, and this kind of platform that they have to express their views. So
yeah, exactly. There's always something to annoy somebody, isn't there? That's how it goes, especially on the internet as well. So
yeah.
yeah. So obviously that was the the news that we talked about with the Mass Effect. So over to you, Dan. Have you got anything else you want to share on the show?
Yeah, I don't know very much about it, but I mean, I think it would be it wouldn't be much for a games podcast if we didn't sort of talk about sort of latest hardware and things that have come out. And the Oculus Quest 2 came out yesterday for
Yep.
public sale. I've done a bit of research. I'm not really I'm not really an expert on VR. I've not looked into it extensively before. I know that the sort of the Valve Index is kind of the creme de la creme of VR experiences, and the Quest isn't necessarily a direct competitor, but it's from what I can see, for all intents and purposes, it seems like it's a really good entry level VR system. It has standalone capabilities. It has a much more consumer friendly price point. I think it's $299 for like the basic
Yep.
64 gigabyte version. It's got the same refresh rate at the moment as the Oculus Quest, but it has 90 hertz capabilities. So as games come out or get upgraded to 90 hertz, they can support that as well through the Oculus Quest 2. So that's pretty good. Obviously, it's got the controversial Facebook requirement that a lot of people were outraged by. Obviously, that's an entirely different conversation.
Yep.
But I think it's got the highest resolution screens than any other device at the moment. So that's kind of a good thing. But it doesn't have the refresh rate and stuff. So it's obviously sort of held back in some ways. But I mean, it looks cool. I mean, apparently you can play it standalone, so it's not connected to a PC. You can just play games without it being connected to anything, or you can connect it to the PC and then play Beat Saber and Half-Life Alyx, or any of the sort of the big VR games. And from the little research I've done, it sort of seems to hold its own. It's not it's not necessarily it's not like a poor man's Valve Index, for want of a better way of putting it. You can still get a lot out of it. So
Yeah.
it seems pretty cool. I'm certainly interested. I'm not particularly fussed about getting an Oculus Quest 2 right now, but it certainly opens the door, to people that might have been put off by the the higher price points of the other devices.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to mention, because obviously the best selling VR headset out there is the PlayStation VR, and the PSVR isn't as powerful as its competitors, but it's widely available. It has a very competitive price point, an appealing price point to people who are going to invest in that market, and they support it with games that are on the console. Obviously, it's sold around just over 2 million units. By that metric, it's sold less than PlayStation Vita. You could see that as being a colossal failure. But I think the big difference is the fact that VR isn't going anywhere. Handheld gaming is. As much as I love the VR, the Vita, it's that market is disappearing. Whereas VR is getting better and better, and I don't think Sony have been quite clear that they're keeping they're going to keep investing in this. They've got first party studios that are making VR games. So the Quest coming in and being able to offer an experience at a competitive price point and be able to have the option of using the headset on its own, on its standalone headset, or be able to use the headset while tethering it to your PC to get a better visual experience is a great, a really, really clever use of the hardware and a really good play into that market to try and compete against things like PlayStation VR and get more people invested. I think the thing that might turn people off is Facebook. As you said, it is going to, but in reality, I don't think that's going to impact many people because, well, most people have a Facebook account or a Twitter account or something along those lines. So, but yeah, I was quite intrigued when I read that and saw the headset and how cheap it was. I was really surprised by how cheap it was. I think it's now cheaper or the same price as PSVR.
Yeah, well, I think the PSVR, I think you can certainly get one a lot cheaper than £300 now. But I mean, obviously it's been out a lot longer, so you'd sort of expect that. But yeah, I think I think it's not something I would invest in now. I think I still need to see. I think I would be more interested in like the next generation of console VR. And see what the PS5 comes out with, the sort of the second iteration of that headset,
Yeah.
and what they do with that. I did play PSVR on the PS4 and had some good fun with it, but it wasn't. I didn't feel like the experience was something that I could necessarily replace regular sort of TV gaming with.
No.
I think I sort of thought it was fun. It's a bit more of a gimmick. You could have a bit of fun with it for a little while. I know we sort of got together with a couple of friends and played like Super Hot and a couple of the sort of PSVR sort of games, and it was fun. But that was it. I'd sort of like to get to a point where it's almost like Ready Player One, where it's like you just escape this world, and you just completely forget about where you are, and do you know what I mean? It almost sort of transcends like reality, and you go into this alternate reality.
Yeah, and certain games, these type of things are going to live and die by the quality of the titles that come out. I think the biggest play in this market for the games is Half-Life Alyx, which you go onto Steam and look at the reviews, and they're overwhelmingly positive. It's meant to be a next level VR experience, but you can only play that on the PC, and PC, whilst it's a bigger market now than it's ever been, PC gaming doesn't really make any impact or dent in the mainstream market when it comes to consoles, where people just boot up the console and play something like FIFA. But again, if you can make people on those consoles have VR headsets and get a benefit from them, and also as well, they can see that there is support, because one of the things that put me off a VR headset was the fact that I had a Vita on day one. I've got a Vita, and I saw Sony invest in that console for that idea, that premise for maybe 6 months, and then just basically left it, and that was it. And I've got my time out of PS Vita, but there is a bit of saltiness in the back of it, thinking, well, why would I invest in the PSVR if I get it, and then you just basically do a runner and don't invest in the ecosystem anymore? And it's good to see that Sony haven't done that, and it seems that they are quite committed. I think one of the things that was noticed on the PS5 teardown video is the fact that on the PS5 it's got USB 3 or USB-C on the front, and because it's got USB-C, that means that it can power external devices as well at a level that means it can be used. So the idea is that there is going to be a VR headset for PS5, and it's not going to require this separate processing unit which the current VR unit requires, PSVR requires. So hopefully that'll get better, and that'll be more, a more elegant way to be able to use VR on the PS5 as opposed to the PS4. And clearly the Oculus is winning there in the fact that it's a standalone unit, so there are no wires, so you can just literally stick it on your head and it goes. So
yeah, it's interesting. we'll just have to see where it goes from here. And I think if VR can get to a point where it is more mainstream, I think that's that would certainly be an exciting time. It's just seeing these sort of like I think like when a Call of Duty game launches and it's VR. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that's when it's here, it's mainstream, it's for everyone. But obviously I think we're still a little bit away from that. And Half-Life Alyx is a massive step in the right direction. But like you say,
Yeah.
it's locked behind a less casual price point. I mean, you could buy, two PlayStation 5s for the sake of for the cost of a Valve Index. So,
Yeah.
I'd say it's a more niche product. It's not mainstream yet, unfortunately. But the Oculus Quest is a step in that direction. So I think it's
Yeah.
exciting.
No, that is good. So that is good. Well, there's nothing else. There's no other news that I saw that really stuck out to me to mention. Have you got anything else that you want to run through?
Nothing massive. I just a sort of point to note. Rockstar acquired a new studio. They've taken over Ruffian Games, which were the Crackdown 2 developer. They've
Yep.
rebranded to Rockstar Dundee. So they're going to be working on future Rockstar projects, nothing named, GTA 6, cough cough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
That's
And
nice. A bit more investment in the UK market.
yeah, and Avengers is pretty much dead. It's got less than 1,000 players. I think Thanos has won that battle. So
Yeah.
it's sad to see, but it's a reflection of live service, dull gameplay, locking Spider-Man to the PlayStation and expecting everyone else to pay the same price for other platforms. It's just been a massive mess, and it's such a shame. It
Yeah.
could have been something very good.
Yeah, that game had, for my view, that game had disaster and half-baked written all over it in terms of the beta that was bland and the fact that they were pushing their ability to, or pushing the way that they were in getting money for their console, for that game, sorry, before it even came out through
Yeah,
sponsorship deals and pre-order. It just meant that by the time the game came out, it just seemed like it was a bit bland, and yeah.
yeah. And I really
Yeah,
empathize, like there is some talent on that team, like there's certain components of that dev team, are super talented and they've made really good things, but it's just been let down by, really shoddy business and aggressive sponsorships and just really anti-consumer business practices, on the publishing end, and maybe that is an example of the publisher letting down the developer. I mean, there's things in the
yeah,
game that they've let themselves down on, but I think, I think I'd hazard a guess and say that if you gave a dev team, an option, like you make a live service game which has a repetitive gameplay cycle, and the idea is that players have to grind and progress on a week by week basis and then pay for additional content, or you can make a really strong single player story based narrative, filled with passion and storyline. They would choose the storyline single player every day. Like, if they got rid of that live service, sort of, gameplay, and they made it, say something more reminiscent of like Marvel Spider-Man on the PS4, like
yeah.
that game could be amazing. I mean, the main character, the girl, what's her name? Is it like Kamala Khan or something?
That's it. Yeah,
I mean, when the game came out, the initial sort of reviews is that she was really, she was a really good, really sort of good character. You really bought into her story and you really empathized with her, and she was really strong, and she just fit so well into the Avengers universe. Where before the game came out, there was so much sort of what's the word, sort of skepticism about how how that game would play. People want to play as Thor or Spider-Man or Captain America. People didn't want to play as Kamala Khan, but then when the game came out, it's like, well, actually, she's really good. Like, she kind of holds her own here. Like, this is a really good character, and I think that just makes that game more tragic. Like, if they had released Marvel Avengers with Kamala Khan,
yep,
as a sort of single-player Spider-Man-esque sort of game, then it could have been really good, but it sadly isn't. And the fact that it's got less than 1,000 concurrent players on the PC, I don't know about consoles, I think that just speaks volumes, and hopefully publishers and whatnot will take notice and start.
I mean, the trouble with these type of games as well is there's just they're not small games, so the time investment is going to be massive, and there's so many contenders in this space at the moment that are fighting for your time. It's quite refreshing sometimes when you get a game that you can play through once and it's finished in 10 hours or 12 hours, and that's it, you're done with it. Whereas like kind of going back to the conversation earlier you mentioned about these kind of persistent, online worlds that you've got, where you have like Destiny, you're going to have The Division, you've got Anthem, you've got the Avengers. There's just so many games that are there, and then you've got games that don't end, like you've got Fortnite, PUBG, Daisy. These type of things, these experiences, they demand so much of your time. There's very few people I can imagine who are going to have multiple type that you're going to have to be playing Destiny 2 and The Division 2 at the same time. People just don't have that much of that time there. So ultimately, the games that stick are the ones that are going to be better quality, and they're going to have really interesting stories or really good engaging quest lines and satisfying gameplay loops. And ultimately that's, I think, what this game lacked. It came in and obviously it had the important IP it did, but that isn't enough to be able to carry them into this persistent world, because people have to be able to enjoy the gameplay over anything. And from what I saw and from what I played on the beta, things may have changed, but it was just really dull. It was it was just really button mashing-y, and it wasn't a fan. Hopefully they can remedy some of them, and fix that, because as you say, it's a talented team. Crystal Dynamics are the guys that made this one, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and obviously they, the games they've made before have been fantastic. So, but only time can tell. I know they're clearly working on some ways to try and boost up the player numbers and player counts, and sadly, this could be another disintegration that just kind of comes in with a bit of a, hey, here's a shiny new game, and then no one plays it, and it dies 5 months later. So
well, I think it is the next Anthem right now, isn't it? It's certainly in that ballpark, unfortunately.
And we'll see what they'll do with it. Square Enix might throw in the towel and say, okay, we're fine with that. We've got Final Fantasy 14. That's making us enough megabucks at the moment online. Or they might do an EA and go, right, we're going to, rather than letting it die, we're going to take it back to the drawing board and then re-release it next year, in an enhanced version. And actually, it's funny that I brought up the example of Final Fantasy 14, because when that game came out first, it was an absolute shambolic mess. And they did take it to the drawing board and came back with a Realm Reborn, which is classed as probably one of which is classed as probably one of the best MMOs. In fact, year after year, it is classed as the best MMO of the year. And I'm pretty sure that when it comes to the end of the year and we're talking, we see in place talking about Game of the Year discussions, Final Fantasy 14 is always in there in terms of a nomination, because people like it so much. So
yeah,
so we'll see.
Interesting. Well, we've been waffling on, haven't we, for for a couple hours? I think that's what people tune in for. But I don't think there's anything else newsworthy that I can think of. Anything on your end, or?
No, I think that's pretty much covered it up. So this part of the show, we turn into the audience and answer any questions that have been sent through. This week we haven't had anything sent through. So if you are wanting to get in touch and be part of the show, Rob did last week, you can do by contacting either me or Dan. Just drop us a message on Twitter, and that's at Metroidvania or at TatchND through Twitter to be part of the show. And like I say, whether it's feedback, whether it's corrections, whether it's getting involved with questions or concerns, we'd love to have you, have you part of the show. And the only way the show can get better is with that feedback and with your engagement. So,
and good or bad feedback, please, let us know. It's all beneficial.
Bro. The only thing I will end on, and one thing I was meaning around is, if either of you have been following me or Dan on Twitter, you may have seen over the past few weeks where there may have been a not so much a crumble, but maybe a defiant stand by Dan in terms of your steadfast that you are getting the PS5, and you are gonna not get the Xbox Series X, and you're going to stay on that console, whilst everyone seemingly around you is getting the Xbox Series X. So do
I
you
feel
think you're
like
gonna?
I'm being ambushed here.
Do you think by the end of the year you'll be getting it, or are you going to be quite happy on the PS5?
Uh, I would turn that question over to Xbox and Microsoft. You know, I would say to them, are you going to release anything that will get Dan on the Xbox, or are you going to stand by your lack of first-party exclusives and give him no reason to play your shiny new toy?
Yeah.
Um, I feel like I'm throwing shade. No, I mean, the God's honest truth is, nothing has changed in that I don't have, brand loyalty. I don't only, buy iPhones. I don't only buy Androids. I don't only buy Samsung televisions or Sony televisions. Like, I simply go where it makes the most sense. And I think when it comes to these next generations of consoles, I know I can't get both. It would be very
Yeah.
unlikely. Even if I, had the funds set to one side, it'd be very unlikely that I would get both at launch, given the scarcity of pre-orders. But it was a no-brainer for me in that it was just the PlayStation 5 it has the games that I want to play.
Yeah.
I don't care whether you call it a PlayStation 5 or whatever. The name of the console, the company that makes that console, to me is irrelevant. It's just that they simply have a stronger lineup of games, and I'm not loyal to PlayStation anymore that I'm loyal to Xbox. They've just got to, the onus is on them as the business rather than me as the consumer to get me to buy their console. And I
Yeah.
feel like whilst Microsoft have certainly set themselves up in a good position, they're not doing anything right now that I want to be a part of. I'm not a fan of Game Pass. I can certainly understand the value for money, but I like, call me old school, but I like to buy games and own games. I don't
Yeah.
want to subscribe to games. I would rather buy a game and then it be mine and I just play it. And if I stop playing it, I stop playing it, but I still own it. I don't need to continually pay a subscription to play it. And I think right now the Xbox ecosystem, the selling point of that is that you've got thousands of games to play for the cost of a monthly subscription. And I just don't want any part of that. So, it then comes down to, well, what games are on that console that I can only play on that console? And there isn't anything.
Yeah, no, you make some good points, and I think the thing you mentioned earlier is I'm in the same boat when it comes to choosing a console to get which one you get. It if I wasn't looking at the pure multiplayer co-op experience that I've mentioned, just by I've already got the Xbox One X. I'm not selling that. I'm going to use that to be able to play with someone else who's going
Yeah.
to get the Series X. I'd be all over the PS5 day one, absolutely. And I think I'm pretty confident by February, March, I'll definitely have the PS5 by that point. So, but you make good points in terms of the consoles, and like you say never. We might see you on Xbox, you might see me on PS5 in the near future, but only
I'll,
time
I'll
can tell.
I'll conclude with this. At some point, I will own an Xbox Series X. Like, at some point, I will. Like, I've always owned both consoles in a console cycle. I've never gone like a whole cycle with not at least owning the console at some point. I just think the 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 exciting thing with Microsoft is the acquisition of studios and the studios that they have making games for them. And I think the the time that I purchase a console, purchase the Xbox Series X will be when it's clear that there are games coming to the Xbox Series X that I can't play anywhere else, and they start to get a return on this massive investment that they've put into their acquisition of first party studios,
Yeah.
and that'll be the time that I at some point do get the Xbox. But I'm by no means a fanboy. I just think right now the better value for money for me is the PlayStation. We talked about this before, but Miles Morales, obviously I'm getting that day one.
Yeah.
Later on in the year, I'm really intrigued by Ratchet and Clank. The PS5 gameplay reveal I thought was super exciting. The Horizon Forbidden West is obviously a system seller in its own right, and Ragnarok. I'm playing through God of War at the moment. I'm certainly invested in that game, and would see no reason, unless this game goes off the cliff and I don't enjoy it for whatever reason. I'm not seeing any reason why I wouldn't be invested in playing a sequel. So just that first year alone, if that first year of games was on the Xbox, I'd be buying an Xbox. No question. It just doesn't have the exclusive games that I want to play, and single player story based games right now are what I'm invested in. It's not multiplayer. It's not old games coming back. I'm not interested in PS4 games or PS3 games. I want to play PS5 games or Xbox Series X games. It's the next generation I want to invest in, not the previous. So.
Yeah, and I think that's it. The underlying thing with when it comes to console ownership is that to get the best gaming experience, you can't just have one console or the other. There are going to be exclusives on multiple on each of the platforms, and the only way you're going to be able to experience them is by having them. And I think there were clear games that you could only get on the Xbox, which were really good to play this generation. And the same as well, with the PS4, obviously me and you went through our lists. So if you're listening to this and you want to know details of our list, you can go back to one of the earlier episodes when we go through them. But ultimately, the only way you're going to be able to experience both of those is by having both of those consoles. And, there is no benefit in fanboyism, because ultimately you're going to lose out on experiences by choosing not to invest in the general ecosystem. So.
Yeah, and I've always said that. I've always stood by the fact that, if you lock yourselves in, and we can talk about anything. We talk about, cars or music or if you or sports. If you lock yourself into only one thing, if you only watch football, well, you're missing out on so many other sports. If you only listen to metal, well, you're missing out on so many other genres of music. So it's like, this fierce loyalty that people have to to a company that really don't know, they couldn't care less.
Of course not. No.
It just makes no sense. You're
just want your money.
Yeah, you're the consumer. The power is in your hands, and the more competition there is, the better. And the onus is on Microsoft and Sony to get you to invest in their product, not the other way around. You don't have to convince them. It's their responsibility to convince you. And just to bring this to a final point, PlayStation have done a better job of convincing me, but that's right now. Not in the future.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see. So, brilliant. All right, then we'll. I think that's good to go for the show. So thank you everyone for tuning in. And like I said before, reach out to us, let us know. And until next time, we'll catch you later.